Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, today we are diving into a massive geographical mystery, and it's hiding right up there in the ice and rock of the far north. We're talking about a secret neighbor, an international border dispute, and, honestly, you're not going to believe this, a completely friendly exchange of liquor. So grab a seat and get ready to totally rethink your geography trivia, because this one, it's a fantastic story. Section 1. Canada's surprising second neighbor, a geographical twist. Okay, let's dive right into this. We're going to start with a geography fact that pretty much everyone accepts as absolute truth. Canada only borders the United States. And look, to be fair, that border is 8,891 kilometers long. That is an absolutely staggering distance. It is literally the single longest international land border anywhere in the world. When you have a border that immense, sweeping all the way across an entire continent, it's pretty easy to see why we all just assume it's the only one Canada's got. But that brings us to the real question of our explainer today. Does Canada actually have another land neighbor? It totally feels like a trick question, right? Because if you look at a standard map of North America, Canada just looks like this giant cap sitting cleanly on top of the US, and it's just surrounded by oceans on every other side. But I want you to hold on to that thought, because there is a brilliant little twist hiding right there in plain sight on the map.
When people are hit with the idea of a second Canadian neighbor, most try to, logic their way through it. They guess Russia, maybe, because it's right across the Arctic, or perhaps Greenland, since it's visibly super close to Canada's northeast islands. But the real answer? Denmark. I know, that sounds practically impossible. Denmark is a European nation sitting nearly 4,000 kilometers away from Canada. So how on earth could they possibly share a physical land border? Well, let's solve this mystery.
Section 2. The Mystery of Hans Island, a tiny Arctic rock. To figure out exactly how Canada borders Denmark, we have to zoom way, way deep into the Arctic to one very specific spot, a tiny, rugged, rocky island called Hans Island. It sits quietly tucked away in this waterway known as the Kennedy Channel, wedged right between Canada's Ellesmere Island and Greenland. Let me tell you, it is remote, it is harsh, and it is entirely uninhabited, just a barren rock. But this little rock, it's the absolute key to our whole puzzle. Remember how people often guess Greenland might be Canada's neighbor? Well, Greenland actually isn't a fully independent nation on its own. By definition, it's an autonomous territory within the Kingdom of Denmark. So the crucial point is, by bridging that giant 4,000-kilometer gap across the Atlantic Ocean, the political reality of Greenland suddenly brings the sovereign reach of Denmark right up to the icy shores of Canada's Arctic islands. Section 3. The Friendly Whisky War, a peaceful dispute. Now, this incredibly close proximity led to a fascinating situation. It has got to be one of the most unusual and honestly most charming territorial disputes in all of modern history. Because Hans Island sits right smack in the middle of the channel between Canadian and Danish territory, both nations just looked at the map and said, yep, that's ours. For decades, both Canada and Denmark insisted that this tiny, freezing rock belonged to them. But the wildest part of this whole story? This multi-decade dispute never involved a single soldier. Zero. There were no navies mobilized, no troops deployed, and absolutely no shots fired. Instead, they executed this incredibly specific, three-step tactical operation. Whenever military officials or government reps from one country would actually visit this desolate little island, they carried out this hilarious, friendly ritual. Step 1. They would respectfully remove the other country's flag that had been planted there. Step 2. They'd proudly raise their own nation's flag right in its place. And step 3, and this brilliantly illustrates the whole vibe of this dispute, they would leave behind a bottle of local spirits. So let's break down that exchange because it's just so good. When the Canadians visited, they would leave behind a bottle of good old Canadian whiskey to accompany their maple leaf flag. Then, when the Danes arrived, maybe months, maybe even years later, they would swap the flags out and leave behind a bottle of traditional Danish schnapps. This completely peaceful, recurring joke went back and forth literally for decades. It was a full-blown international territorial dispute carried out entirely through good-natured pranks and complimentary liquor. Section 4. Drawing a new border. Permanent resolution. But as they say, all good things, even a whiskey war, must eventually come to an end. After decades of this whole dispute, with the alternating flags and the swapping of bottles, we fast forward to the year 2022. Canada and Denmark finally looked at each other and decided it was time to officially settle the matter. They sat down, reached a formal diplomatic agreement, and you know what their solution was? They just drew a line right down the middle and physically divided Hans Island into two parts. And in doing so, they officially created a brand new, legally recognized international land border,
which officially rewrites the geographical facts we've all grown up with. Canada now legitimately possesses exactly two land neighbors. You've got the massive, sweeping border with the United States to the south, and now you have Denmark sitting right there in the Arctic. I mean, this is an absolutely brilliant piece of trivia to keep in your back pocket. Seriously, the next time you're at a dinner party and someone brings up geography, you are now armed with the ultimate answer that almost everyone forgets.
Section 5. Rethinking the map. Hidden stories. Geography isn't just about maps. It's full of incredible stories hidden in the smallest places. I absolutely love that quote. It is the perfect reminder of exactly why exploring the world around us is so deeply rewarding. We tend to look at world maps as these static, boring grids of lines and colors that were just sort of locked into place centuries ago. But they aren't. They are living, breathing documents. They're filled with human quirks, friendly rivalries, and these amazing, surprising twists that connect places separated by thousands of kilometers. And that leaves us with one final provocative question for you to ponder today. If a tiny, uninhabited rock out in the freezing Arctic can hide a decades-long whiskey war and secretly connect Canada to Europe, well, what other incredible stories are hiding on our world maps, just waiting for us to zoom in and discover them? Definitely think about that the next time you spin a globe. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. And hey, keep your curiosity alive.